good morning. I had some pretty major psychic downloads last night, so I'm going to talk about them. If not to post, to get them out of my head. This is funny, this goes back to the reason why I started the channel. And then the act of being witnessed, when I think about recording the thoughts just to get them out of my head, changes my ability to get the thoughts out. That's what I've been confronting, the idea of being witnessed. This is a good segue because part of the download was about how through all of the different webs with the different power players and the energy structures that are on Earth right now, we're always looking for the source. And it's very Wizard of Oz because when you think about who's behind the curtain at the end of that, it's like Ghost of the Machine stuff. Ghost of the Machine. And I'm hearing Soundtrack to My Life, which is a song by Kid Cudi. He peaked in 2012, in my opinion, and I really like certain songs like Up, Up, and Away, The Prayer, and Soundtrack to My Life. In some ways, it doesn't matter because the whole point of this, again, when we think about God, source energy, or love energy, or all of creation expanding infinitely to understand itself, this is where we realize that our own existences are by default an expression of a fractal, an expression of fractal energy. This is where my twisties come back into play because what they imply is that every single millisecond, you can slice time however you want it. Everything that you possibly contribute, it's like the primary birth wound. Everybody is grappling with being separated from the womb. That's the lifelong source of existential angst, and I made a painting about that in 2018, shortly after the experience that I talked about having something put into my arm. The painting's called A Safe Space, and it pictures a fully formed fetus, but assumedly in utero, kind of right at the birth moment, and it's this beautiful like grace period. It's another transition where the life is like completely rendered and it hasn't passed into this dimension really. I will be talking at great length about the womb and the power of the healed feminine energy. So everything that we do through the fabric of time and space by default, because the fact that you exist means that you're partaking in this. This is my way of seeing reality. There are infinite ways to translate what it is that I'm talking about. There are infinite ways to translate what it is that I've been always talking about for my entire creative life. Thinking about, I was grappling, this is why I haven't been able to do the Barbie thing. I know nobody wants to hear me say Barbie again, ever, because it's like, oh my God, just do it or stop talking about it. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. I haven't been able to work through it because in some ways, all of what I'm going to be breaking down where I can talk about like, this is why this is problematic. It's a critical lens. It's a critical lens. I love having cultural critical commentary on a lot of things, especially in the media. It's very easy to do. But the viewpoint that I received is something that I already knew, but it's like this point of amnesia within my own awakening fractal that gets dusted over with forgetfulness sometimes, and then I pass back over that point in my twisty ascension, well, repeatedly, because as you ascend, if you think about the fractal getting tighter and tighter, it takes less cycles for you to repeat the same thing and immediately correct it to the point where it's instantaneous, where you're walking in a very pure connection to God source energy and embodying therefore love and being able to transmit that easily. And I had a I'm not gonna be able to talk about this for a while publicly, just like profound experience last night where I was transcending very like quantum mechanically, literally. My consciousness was transcending like the vines and the branches, if you will, of my own like fractal participation in time and space, including all of the connections that I've made in my life to any person ever, big or small. It was a very deep remembrance of this spot in my own like ascension fractal, or like the puzzle of my own life, because I only have my own life to guide me through this. That's kind of what's interesting about this. The separateness when we have the primary birth wound that takes us out of the safety of the primordial womb space, which is akin to oneness. That is the love of God because you know nothing else. That's when the amnesia takes place, where you know that energetically you belong to something that is inextricably linked at all times, because we are perceiving the reality through a dense physical separation of particles. It was an understanding that because everybody has their own perception, and I'm seeing one of those optical illusions, or if you think about James Turrell, the artist who does light installations, they're artworks, but they're in galleries, and it will be like a certain color or a certain kind of light hitting the wall in a certain way such that it may appear like a completely perfect, you know, with the shading and the gradients, the way the light would hit a 3-dimensional cube or something, but really it's just a swatch of light on the wall in the corner. It plays with our perception. It helps us remember that the way that you look at things is everything. So when the way you look at things changes, everything changes. It's this, we could call it orgasmic ripple out in the time-space quilt, where you can call back all your power in the present moment when you're like, oh shit, I'm okay. Hey, I'm okay. It's like a house of cards, immediately ripples throughout all time and space and adjusts your quantum timeline to attain a higher level of embodied love than you once, a second ago, didn't have. And that's why in Abraham Hicks publications, when Esther is channeling the energy of Abraham, they talk about the frequency and the amount of time that you need to sustain, like 17 seconds. If you can hold that frequency where you're like, not only am I able to see outside the finite, the confines of my conscious mind and all of the ego scripts that dictates to me regularly, but I can also allow that to be what it is. I don't have to shut it down or shut it out, and still connect to something that allows for everything to be okay as I experience my human dramas, trials, and tribulations. And when you set yourself free of that burden, you set other people free of that burden. It's instantaneous, it's energetic, it's in the twisties. This is why certain people, you don't have to say anything. I said this a couple weeks ago, and I've been going through a really big timeline shift. I don't know, you can probably tell through the videos. I can tell, I know that I've chosen to record certain things in periods of, like, you know, confusion and trying to work it out, because when it comes out of my mouth, I'm basically writing a book through the YouTube channel as well. That's been made clear to me. I can get some type of app or something, or myself or a person or AI to transcribe all of the information I've ever put out on these videos. And like, if you did have a magic tool that could sort it into categories and create workbooks and understandings and you know, like hand-drawn diagrams of the things that I've described to perfectly kind of accompany all these different lessons, the amount of people who ever see the videos will never matter, because in the quantum time-space continuum, everything I've ever said is already said. Everything I'm ever gonna say is already coming. And I'm starting to understand the feedback loop of my own energetic connection and how I'm supposed to, it's a huge activation that I did with this clearing in the quantum session, where, I mean, I told you before when I was processing this experience, or I mentioned on a different video, I was saying, I left it so open-ended, but I said, please make it everything I need it to be. Help me surrender to the remaining blocks. And that's why last night, as I continue to integrate this experience, I was like clearing out these really small twists. If you think about the Mandelbrot fractal, the Mandelbrot set, and then you think about, so it actually doesn't repeat infinitely, it repeats in a certain way, algorithmically again, until it gets to another coded fractal, another equation you could say, called the Julia set, which resembles a little bit more of a spiral arm thing. And if you're interested in this, you can go back to the videos I posted in Italy, because I was immersed with the Julia set when I was making some of the butterfly paintings. But it is the Julia set that's infinite. So it's interesting, because the base model of the Mandelbrot is not perfectly infinite, but it contains infinite mechanisms by a nested secondary expression, we could say. Another kind of fractal. And that will take me back to the idea around the fact that it doesn't matter. We can sit around all day talking about like the Illuminati and like different, now like the ET beings and the power structures. That's just a different level of the fractal that has to do with the same separateness or union. It's just that in a different density layer, like interdimensionally, the dynamics play out differently. There's more union, you could say, energy or harmony between the things that we see as being so separate. There's more union energy in those higher timelines, but then it takes a different form when it's manifested into convolution or deviation from source code. And source code, it's just got, I mean, it's there in some ways, the whole thing is a paradox. This gets back into cosmic joke stuff. Yes, there are distortions, but what's the perfect thing anyway? The perfect thing, there are distortions in like evolution and gene code and humanity and nature and all these geometrical things playing out in the way that the world around us manifests, and we're like, that's the distortion itself, is the happening and the unwinding of the expression of the matter. So let me back up and try to do that again in a less confusing way. We can talk about code convolution in anything. And so I use this to talk about genetics, but also paradigms, right? Being offered things that seem really promising, and that's why we're all on board, but it's riddled with subliminal programming that's off base. And that all, if we want to think about it as being this, ghost in the machine, man behind the curtain conspiracy, I think there are players in that. Like, again, you go back to so many layers up. It's not about the big billionaires of the world, the big bad boogeymen. There's a ghost behind that. There's nameless, faceless essences that drive that. It's just the power energies playing, the energies of the power structures playing out on Earth. So what that makes us understand is that there is a part of the corruption on Earth, like in some ways, soldier soul to the devil, people performing, various levels of people being awakened, even in their own contractual situations. So I believe that there are certain people, which is where you get situations like Kanye West and stuff, people who are awakened to their own ability to have had a different choice in life, but working out their own karma through being bound in something, where you've got all the symbolism around, like, the shush, don't tell. You need me. It's a deep understanding. They're embodying a twisting and a distortion on purpose that is becoming more and more apparent to a lot of people as we go through this all together. Embodying it on purpose, but the thing is, that's why it's so alluring. That takes us back to devil energy in the tarot. It gets you, it ropes you in, the entrappings of the physical world. You can have it all, but what's that for? The compromise of the soul, right? That's where the whole selling the soul to the devil comes in. But it's like, okay, so that makes us uncomfortable, and now we're trying to figure out who did it, blah, blah, blah. That's still the ego entrapment. Because at the end of the day, we can sort through it all we want, and I will be doing it and acknowledging it, because you can still immerse yourself in the narrative and how it's manifesting. But those are expressions of the shadow sides of our own understandings of ourselves. So we're collectively manifesting the fact that that's where we're at in humanity, that we still have this great divide where there are, like, power structures feeding corrupt, distorted sexual energies, therefore the creative life force energy that fuels this reality. We're breaking out of those types of codings that are thousands of years deep in our human lineage in order to have something of a rebalancing in polarities. Every time I've been triggered by somebody, or I feel less than, or I feel jealous or envious, it's because it represents something that I don't have or feel like I can't be. And the reason why it's been exposed, why I've been exposed to it, so that I can understand through inspiration that there's more out there for me to come into. And the whole notion around triggering is that we see something else, and maybe even if we don't aspire to become it, and we can't, understand that there's a root of jealousy in it that makes us feel like we're immediately, the brain kind of like breaks it down into like insufficiency. Like, because it's out there and I haven't yet attained this, then I'm not doing it right. It's a very, I think, subliminal thing that runs through us. So if there's not something that you aspire to within another, if you are able to be like, the reason why it's irritating me or something is because in this moment, it's as if I'm assuming that I can't use this as inspiration. It's where we get into lack mentality and the true flow of abundance. We're just not used to understanding that everybody can have like a better time of it, right? We're caught in systems around tit for tat and things at certain things' expense. So the whole thing about being triggered by other people is that, like, there is something within ourselves. So here's another thing. I've had many past lives. I've talked about several of them. A lot of them, I'm shown certain things that I need to know for my own consciousness's integration as Mariah in this life. There's no need to go through all of them. That's obliterating. I had a pretty obliterating experience last night where I was like, I get it. My physical body and mind can't hold all of this, but I was in deep. And it was a big deal for me to see things in this new way. And so there are past lives for everybody. You know, if you are an old soul, you've been a bad person. I've done bad things and I've suffered. In karma, there's been certain things that have been worked out such that those lessons lie in an earlier chapter of my incarnational reality. And so there's something really big around my own abundance and deservingness, because I'm like, I feel guilty. I feel like I don't have the right to talk about struggle and navigating things, because it doesn't make sense that I understand it so profoundly, but it does, because I'm accessing levels of human empathy, really. But they're energetic, so I don't have to go through all these hoops and loops to understand anybody on a deeper level because of the energetic root of the language, where, again, I talk about being around people. Your consciousness, if you're connected to the quantum field of interconnectedness, you can pretty easily feel, and this is how I talk again about in the future, not being able to lie energetically. And I saw a really good post by Aisha Ophelia yesterday, and she's like, it's like a caterpillar walking, but it's filmed from the side, so the shadow's really big, like, and it's like people walking around with their unintegrated aspects these days. And then it commented on the fact that as we see, it's very apparent moving into the future what timeline you're on and how you're committing yourself to the collective manifestation of reality and what you haven't integrated. It's becoming more apparent to see that, and it has to do with the fact that, like, yes, I can sit around people and feel crippling anxiety and discomfort, but it's actually not mine. And I've carried it for my whole life because it's very real, because I'm confused, you know, like my performance anxiety, my perfectionistic tendencies, where I'm like, okay, well, like this, you simply can't make everybody happy, even when you do things that are done perfectly well, because the only one you ever had to make happy is yourself. And that will set you free. And then embodying that against the resistance of others, not because you don't love them, but because you love yourself. And by doing that, you're able to then love them by extension in a purer way. We're all trying to, out of guilt and obligation, kind of love and validate people without doing it for ourselves first, because of this like ingrained altruistic thing where we're living to do things, right? Mission. It's the whole, back to the paradox and the cosmic joke. There's no point, right, to life. Absurdism, nihilism, existential things, the never-endingness, the fractal, Plato's cave, levels of ascension, and realizing certain things. I know for a fact that the level that I'm at with how I can process and understand the webs of life is a little bit beyond what a lot of people will even be able to access and experience in this life. I'm aware of that. And so the other thing with that is that one of my issues and blocks has been like, okay, well, if that's the case, then why can't I just enjoy it and not talk about it? Why do I have to even, it's like cringeworthy. It's like embarrassing to be like, it's me again. I'm trying to explain my stuff again. Why can't I just be, you know, a quote unquote normal person or something? I am. It's a kind of expression of a person. I have tried to not talk about all of it, and I can't. And when I get confused about what it is I'm even talking about, I go back into my own life, my own learning, and I put it on the shelf, and I re-immerse myself in the human experiment. And then I have this another epiphany somewhere down the road, or something happens, and then I'm like, okay, I do have a very strong soul mission to translate all of this information. And it's not the expectations around it. I'm like, so why am I doing it if no one cares? Why am I doing it if I get such weird kinds of resistance when I stand in it? And I'm, without going further on that tangent, I'm working that out right now. I'm working that out. It has to do with a collective manifestation and what I'm feeling very personally around fearing the healed feminine energy. So what I was saying about 10 to 15 minutes ago, 27 minutes, yeah, I don't know. It's a language. And this is why I talk about my artwork and my understandings as like, it's like my religion. I'm like, is it art? Is it my brain? Who knows? My guides just said, it's your channel, dear. It's your divine, it's an access point. It's your gifts. It's your spiritual gifts. So when we talk about clairsenses and people who are psychically gifted and stuff, there's a reason for that. And we get all stressed out and it's not understood about how to utilize them. That will change in the future. People will understand these things differently. But I want to circle back. So I was talking about how I had in real time been processing something on video in the most recent one that I posted from the QHHT session, where I was like, maybe this split, you know, in the feminine collective, the unified healed sexual energy that is in expressing in polarity on earth, masculine and feminine, because of dualistic nature. the core wound for this, I was cleaning up in my own Akash. Women don't like the way it feels to not be enough for a man. And we bring it back down to like sexual needs. A lot of people grapple with the idea of true monogamy and like knowing if that's even attainable. And humanly, animalistically, we see in the animal kingdom, there's not really right and wrong in the natural expression of the way that animals utilize their instincts and therefore mate and partner over time from a biological level. There are different kinds of animals that enjoy recreational sexual experience in a way that doesn't really have a point, right? It's not as explainable. I mean, of course it is when in the science of animal behavior, like bonding and pheromonal stuff and like all this stuff that you can go into. Okay, so a lot of women would blame a general, if there is any infidelity within the man, if there is this ability to not satisfy the man, and I know I'm talking heteronormatively, gender normatively, but it's all energy anyway, so the satisfying of the man. Satisfying of the man is a satisfying of the self from the collective level. It's one side, it's one aspect of every person. It's one half of this biologically programmed dualistic expression through humanity. Okay, so women might think looking out on the world, and it's like, well, the reason why like a man can go on the internet and engage with, you know, a filtered version of reality and see perfect bodies and all these different types of crazy things, and then we get into when you get into darker distortions, like super hardcore graphic violent pornography, and people really getting off on that. There's some things that people don't ever want to talk about because it's almost like a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that certain things exist, but it's like, if it does, what does it mean? That's where I'm at. A lot of women carry and embody themselves in a way today that is clearly, it's very clearly embodied of this compromise thing that's trying to be appeasing, and that manifests in a lot of different ways. We could talk about our fascination with prostitution and sex work, right? And the exploitation of the feminine power for all time, right? It's a collective manifestation. So instead of like, does it exist? Does it not? Is he cheating? Well, let's just talk about what it means. Let's assume that we have these issues as society. Men really like and gravitate towards women who they're empowered, they're emboldened, but just in the way they like. Okay, so how does that play out in the strip club dynamic? The man has the power, the man's holding the money, the man gets to do what he wants, right? I mean, I know there's rules, right? If we think about, I mean, in order to survive, the oppressed woman has always banded together with other women who understand, right? This is like the matriarchal like passing down, such that like in order to just get by with the way the world is, one day it will not be like this. The stripper has to acknowledge that that is a surrender of power, right? It's like, we'll just let him think he's in charge. Like I actually see wenches in the medieval times, like women in the closet, maybe somebody having been raped or beaten. I don't know if this is past life or I'm picking up on somebody else's shit, but let's just roll with it. Being comforted and saying like, it's not always going to be like this. You go in there and you let him know that he's right, because that's the only way to work with this, or something like that. You know what I mean? So there can be a woman, you know, women are chameleons. This is why so much of why they're feared, right? Women know how to get what they want, and they use sexual energy to do that in many cases, which is why there's this contortion into the dark feminine. Women abusing their sexual power. So men, the reason why, not all men, you know, men and tit for tat. Okay, so a lot of men are like firsthand understanding of just how deeply manipulative women can be, and women in the feminine, we don't want to have to acknowledge that, but it's true. It's a byproduct of having, it's an adaptation. And so that's why women kind of do these things where we're in subconscious. It's an adaptive mechanism. So the way this is played out for me is like, I can be in my truth and not feel I'm alone, I'm talking to myself, whatever. Someone's gonna see this video someday, they're not, it doesn't matter. As soon as I'm in a situation of need in a somewhat public setting, I think, so pretend, say my car was having a problem. Needing to get gas, but not being able to get my gas cap open and having it be frozen shut. Anyway, I was like, I don't know what the heck is going on. I'm in a predicament. And so even though, like, because I understand, in my opinion, a fair amount from my experiential knowledge about the inner workings of the male brain, I very naturally can just like, it's acting, okay? Again, like the chameleonic feminine. I show up in a space immediately. It's an adaptive mechanism where I'm just like perceiving and reading and becoming what the person wants me to become. Now, a lot of women relate to this. A lot of girls do this in relationships. You know, you get with somebody and then you want to be loved so badly because there's been this core wound in the collective around the rejection of the feminine. A lot of men don't know how to actually hold and love women in the way that they're meant to. And so the women feel deeply rejected. And so there's this desperate need to be loved, but the convolution is going about it the wrong way by trying to appease, right? And then we realize like there is dark feminine. Each polarity has its dark and light. Dark goddesses like Kali Ma and Lilith, they can help you purge. That's part of nature, right? Death and rebirth, and like the wrath of Mother Nature, forces being strong. But when it's corrupted, it's like power, right? Power is morally neutral. You can use it for bad purposes, you can use it for positive purposes. So without being intentionally manipulative at all or anything, I'm just witnessing. I'm aware of my own histories with how I've performed my femininity over time. And it's validated all the time. Sometimes I'm like, I wonder if I can get away with this, right? But maybe that's not a conscious thought. I just act and do and behave in a certain way because I subconsciously assume that I'm going to be able to get this certain reaction out of somebody based on who I'm picking up on they are. I'll be like playing a little dumb or laughing a certain way. Everything about like eye contact and like subliminals around micro movements in the face and like body language, just guiding myself through everything to just be like, you know, something to be, you use the feminine magic to be received. Something about placating the male ego immediately, but then taking what you want out of it. They don't understand what happened. This goes back to like the vibration, the myth around the voice and sirens and it being too powerful, right? Or the age-old parable, Pussy rules the world. Why is everybody so afraid of that? Because men have no power over it. When men have no power over it, blah, blah, blah. We actually don't need to have power over it. That's not what it's for. It's serving the feminine, the empowered feminine energy shows the light for the man to be truly empowered. So the undoing of the polarity corruption that's been taking place has to do with women acknowledging their own performative or attempts to subconsciously be accepted, right? And then we slip into this space with being able to process this as a human of like, oh no, well, I did wrong. It's like, no, it is a collective manifestation that you can witness in the lives of many people in different ways, in everybody really. I mean, because we're all connected. A lot of people are actors and actresses. They just don't know it because they don't know who they are, and their personality is built out of finding themselves in the way they behave and show up in the world. The exercising of their own consciousness is done in a limited manner that allows for a very specific personality to show up, which goes back to the thing around like, you see people's unintegrated aspects. It's not hidden. None of it is. And it's not like, well, they did wrong. It's like, we are all in this. So when we turn into ourselves and correct that within ourselves, the whole puzzle ripples out and it starts to correct together. Again, it takes it back to live and let live. Oh, yeah. Okay, finish this thought. Okay. So lots of past lives where maybe I've been the villain. Okay, but I don't consciously remember that, but maybe someone else does. Maybe there's someone else who I've interacted with and maybe they had a really deep dream where they were revisiting this other rung in our Akashic interconnectedness where we had some type of past life and I, God forbid, murdered their family. Who knows, Who knows? I don't know. Nobody knows. Even if somebody isn't consciously aware of that, but that's the case and I have wronged them, but there's no evidence for that in this world, our timeline now, our lives now. But it impacts the way they treat me. Like maybe they have a dream about it and it's a nightmare, but they forget it. And then they meet me or we're together and they're interacting and everything I do bothers them and they're mean to me, or they harm me. Who knows? I'm experiencing, pain or discomfort and it feels unjustified. So my ego would be like, okay, well, you're a bitch. I don't get, no. Ew. I got it has to do with like, like human centipede and stuff. I'm not gonna talk about that. It's like if it doesn't pop out of the seams somewhere, it'll come out somewhere else, like a hernia or something, like whack-a-mole. So I'm experiencing that, and instead of seeing it, this is, I posted on the community page the other day, it's like the person who thinks it's a mirror doesn't fight with it because they just see themselves. But the person who doesn't realize it is a mirror will break it and then just shatter, right? Continue to separate and have separateness from understanding the unification. That it's all a projection of the self or consciousness. We're just all different points of consciousness access in the interconnected web. That's why when we are inconvenienced the most or something, there's a reason for it, you know? Even if it's not somebody directly acting away towards me, even if it's somebody in traffic way up there, like some asshole doing something horribly dangerous and being road ragey and something, and I'm like, what a dick. That was dangerous. You shouldn't drive like that. You know, me judging, right? Judging. Or having something to say about the way that anybody else is living their life. That's a collective manifestation. That person's existence in that very moment when they're doing something to harm anybody else is as a humanity, as a group of beings, that's them. Their existence is a collective manifestation of something that resides within us. So if I'm experiencing somebody who's doing something that directly impacts my experience in a negative way, it's like, it engenders the deepest form of empathy and compassion, not because that can be explained or fix the dynamic on a 3D level. It's karmic, right? I'm experiencing some dynamic that makes me feel a certain kind of way that triggers my ego into being like, well, then I cut them out of my narrative and they don't matter. No, we have to be able to hold space for everybody's truth. In some ways, that's unattainable in this 3D reality. So that's what humanity is constantly hurling through space towards. But we're having a deeper understanding of how that's going to be able to be true, where there's a live and let live, and it takes enemies out of it because it turns it into teamwork and an expression of energy, but it allows us the framework to sort through all the ego dramas and stuff. So holy shit, maybe I shouldn't have done this because it's 8:37 in the morning. I need to take a nap. That was just a lot of energy coming through, but I'm glad that I talked about it. 49 minutes? One of my deepest insecurities is being perceived as like manic or something, like just so, it's not a familiar frequency. And so I'm like, I shouldn't post this video because who knows? I don't care. I'm safe to, oh, okay. Here's the last thing I'll talk about in my session as well. We talked about another kind, the reason why I even feared in the first place. That thing around like, well, what if I have this deep surveillance that does feel sinister or dark? So that's why I've been afraid of the aliens, and my questioning is like, okay, so if they're benevolent and they're helping me, then why is the fear so real and validated? Yes, it's the unknown, but in some ways, in the quantum timeline, I know that one day my work will be very meaningful, you know? Maybe I'm one of those people who does a bunch of good stuff and then they die, and then people find it and they're like, oh, this is great and helpful. My career takes off after my death, you know? I don't think that's going to be the case. But it's as if going through different lessons while carrying the weight of the eventuality of the impact of what I'm doing in a quantum way. It does not make sense to my human mind because that's why I'm like so like high stakes. Like it matters so much. That's why I'm so deeply passionate. Because in some ways I don't have a choice. There's a certain level of processing collective energies when we talk about transmutation, where me just trying to do this work, I promise you, even if I did squirrel away into a cave and never talk to anybody and do it and be in my own space and just talk to no one and process it all, it would help people. It doesn't have to be witnessed. So that's why I've been talking a lot recently. You've been watching me churn out this thing that I've been going through for years and years, where I'm like, and this is tying back to Barbie, the movie, the America Ferrera's character's monologue at the end, saying it's impossible to be a woman. You want to be, so I will critique that in due time. I'm just making sure for the purpose of this video now that there's no open loops that pop back up, because there always are. A lot of them get offloaded to different videos, different times. My mind brings them back around when it's time. I see the conveyor belt at a, one of them sushi restaurants where it just goes around and you get to take off what you want. All my thoughts and swirling. My recent download is circulating through my mind like that, where I keep picking up items and putting them back, and it's like a conveyor belt. So when they go around, I get amnesia again. It's crazy. I'm operating in this conscious fractal right now where our human minds can't process it, but our souls know it and our souls can see it. So that's where we come back to the role of the artist. Just play and express. It's valid. You're a lens. You have just as much ability to do that as anybody else. So don't judge its becomingness. It teaches you things to express, to make. Being an artist can heal sexual energy as well. Well, I mean, that's liable to be taken the wrong way. Not really. Yeah, okay, back to the strip club. Women standing, like if you think about it, power stances, right? They talk about like power stances to hype yourself up if you're about to do something. You just stand there with your arms in the air, and then it's, you know, proven to change your brain chemistry so that when you go into your interview, it helps you, whatever. If we have a woman in a strip club who's just really embracing of her natural body because she knows what it is that she's selling, a lot of men, right, you'll get to hear like, sure, we have these expectations around perfect beauty and stuff. That's very crippling to deal with as a woman or anybody witnessed. I mean, men deal with it in their own way, blah, blah, blah. It's not actually about that. We think that it is, but what the men like is just the havingness, and there's some really beautiful relationships that can take place between like that dynamic where there's an understanding. But I believe that it has to do with the woman, just like it's a tipping of her hat to be like, in order to survive, I let you think that you have this power. That is what the man fears. On a spiritual level, the male ego can sense what the woman is capable of. And his fear of it, because of evidence, because of history, because of the collective wound, because of the core nature of this, there's evidence in the collective subconscious to show that women can be corrupt, but so too can there be men and stuff. And so realizing that it's not even about the sexuality of it, it's about the experiencing of what it is that the man craves from the woman in a controlled capacity. And that's what's being unwired. And yeah, I mean, even just sitting here in the car, I'm understanding throughout the course of taking this audio this morning, I'm understanding that I have had past lives. I've been male, I've been female throughout my past lives. I have an affinity for grumpy old men because I've been so many grumpy old men. But more than that, I've been female. It's my predominant, that's why this lifetime I'm female, again, to do the correcting and the feminine polarity in this way. But what I was gonna say is I'm understanding how many lifetimes I have worked with the confines of the current power structure through my incarnational reality as a woman, and had to, it's this strange humility and humbleness within the feminine collective where the male, the man, it realizes you're just a sweet, innocent flower who's an oracle who can see into all things that should be celebrated, protected, amplified. It's not a threat when it's celebrated, protected, and amplified, because it helps us navigate. It has to do with, again, like feminine seers, intuitive, anima animus, and then male, like groundedness, action oriented, what those polarities represent, but the healthy expression of them. There's a different thing taking place in the collective energy now where we find ourselves in human evolution in this whole thing and simulation and whatever in existence that I have in some ways, and many women have who do things that are similar to what I'm doing, trained for lifetimes to be able to, and it's like a cartoon, just like standing there, like softly smiling, like impatient, but making a joke out of it because there's no rush, just waiting for men to wake up and move into a space of being like, oh, I get it now. And that's why it's maternal. There's something scolding in it, but it's deeply sensual because it's very accepting. This is interesting. I'm seeing this whole breakdown around like Oedipal complexes and the notion of acceptance and a mother's love and primary in utero, how there are sexual impulses that are felt in the way the body is forming from a very primary level, and then as children grow up, the denying of sexuality and sexual experience so vehemently, creating all of this contorted programming and lasting foundational memories in a lot of people where we're told to suppress certain things. Kids are very naturally curious and get themselves into weird situations where they're doing something that's wrong. There needs to be a deeper education and understanding of what it all means, because then we all become this certain specific kind of closeted adult somehow. There's extreme versions of that, There's very mild versions of that. Everyone has secrets and shames and guilt, truly. So let's all unpack it together. Yeah, this is going to lend itself to a huge restructuring in the Barbie breakdown, the American Dream video. I haven't been able to do it because I had needed to have this download first to be able to simultaneously work through it the way that the ego mind wants to hear about it, but also narrate from a soul level that can deconstruct it on 2 levels, where it's a hypocrisy. I'll be talking about these things, these conspiracies, programming, the governments, the shadow, the deep state, the force that moves things, but I'll also be talking about it as if that's all an extension of ourselves too, so don't worry about it. It's my own little special theory of everything. Oh, my lasting thought was that the reason why the archetypal healed feminine energy on earth right now is just kind of softly smiling and tapping her foot and being like, they'll get there when they get there. It's beautiful. It's all clicking into place. Is because the history of the world as we've known it has been all about acquisition and power and the hubris of man. The hubris of man. We haven't seen successful shifts that don't have to do with a seizing or a taking over of power by force. So the new paradigm involves that patient waiting around and acceptance, because that is healed feminine energy. So when I'm operating out of shadow, I get these urgencies, these senses of urgency where I'm like, okay, I figured it out. I have to go tell everybody. That's still me working out the kink of my unhealed. Again, everybody on earth is a collective manifestation of my existence. I'm part of the collective manifestation, like you, right? Everybody, every soul, every single thing happening in the fractal that is existence is contributing to the way you feel and think. You're very justified. You're very valid. Now, if you're delusional and you're like, okay, I'm justified, great. You are in that delusion because it's real for you. So go be delusional, work it out, do the learning, and you'll figure it out. I'm not validating all the beliefs anybody carries. I'm talking about the fact that we believe our beliefs for a reason. Again, going back to the fact that this is why there are so many souls infinitely throughout space and time working these things out. It's not by force.